One of the most ironic things is that I'm a geneticist and I've actually never done a genetic test. I'm Dr. Janina Jeff, and this is a word about the complicated relationship between Black people and genetic ancestry testing. Direct-to-consumer tests are any test that any person can order without a physician. And some of the direct-to-consumer tests you might be familiar with is 23andMe, Ancestry.com, Family Tree DNA, MyHeritage DNA, African Ancestry, AfroRoots. So you send in your DNA and they compare your DNA with other DNA samples that they have in their database, something that we call a reference. And that reference might represent a common ancestor you may have, let's say in Africa or in Europe. Now, as you would imagine, if the database is limited in representation, what you get back is the next best match, which may or may not be an actual representation of your genome or your genetic ancestry. Companies are now increasingly updating their results, and that's a very positive thing. That means that they're working to improve their database and their methods so that you get accurate results. I like to tell everyone to not get too attached to the genetic ancestry results, as they're going to be dynamic, constantly changing, and we should be embracing all of our common ancestors and not try to just be tied to one story.
Hello everyone, Achila Yona here, and today we're diving into a topic that continues to spark curiosity and debate: the promises, limitations, and dangers of genetic ancestry testing. I've covered this subject extensively on the channel, but I still find that many people remain unaware of or overlook the truth behind DNA ancestry tests. If you're interested in exploring this topic further, check out my DNA Ancestry Test playlist. You can find the link at the end of this video or in the description below. Furthermore, these tests claim to open a window into our past, tracing our roots back to specific regions, countries, or even ancient tribes. But before you put too much stock in those DNA results, it's essential to understand what these tests can and cannot truly reveal. Let's dive into the complexities together. First, let's clear up a common misconception. Genetic genealogy testing and parentage testing are not the same thing, though they're often confused. Parentage testing is designed to confirm biological relationships, typically between parent and child. These tests are highly accurate, focusing on specific markers that directly correlate to parent-child connections. For instance, a paternity test compares a child's DNA with that of the alleged father to determine a match, offering straightforward and reliable results. Genetic genealogy testing, however, is a different beast altogether. It aims to explore your ancestral origins, offering insights into your ethnic background and ancient family history. These tests analyze broader segments of your DNA, looking for markers associated with different populations worldwide. But unlike parentage tests, they don't offer the same level of precision. Their results are often ambiguous, open to interpretation, and can only suggest potential connections to certain regions or populations. They cannot definitively prove your ancestry. The appeal of these tests is undeniable. For many, particularly those from communities historically disconnected from their ancestral homelands, the idea of reconnecting with their roots is incredibly compelling. The notion that a simple cheek swab can unravel centuries of history and pinpoint your exact origins is pretty powerful. But this is where we need to pause and critically examine what these tests are really telling us. One of the most significant limitations of genetic ancestry testing is that it doesn't prove your ancestry or race in a way that many people might think. These tests analyze only a small portion of your entire genome, providing a narrow snapshot of your genetic heritage rather than a comprehensive view. Imagine your family tree as a vast, intricate network. These tests might illuminate a single branch, but they leave the rest of the tree in darkness. Anthropologists and geneticists have long cautioned against overinterpreting genetic ancestry results. Dr. Deborah Bolnick, a genetic anthropologist at the University of Texas at Austin, has emphasized that race is a social construct, not a biological fact. Genetic ancestry tests can identify markers more common in certain populations, but these markers don't neatly correspond to the racial categories society has constructed. In other words, your DNA doesn't fit into the simplistic boxes that genetic tests might suggest. And they certainly cannot definitively prove your race or ethnicity. Dr. Jonathan Marks, a biological anthropologist, also warns against oversimplifying human diversity through genetic testing. He argues that human genetic variation is continuous and doesn't conform to the neat racial or ethnic categories these tests often imply. By attempting to categorize people based on genetic markers, these tests can perpetrate misunderstandings about human diversity. Genetic diversity is shaped by complex historical processes, including migration, intermarriage, and cultural exchange that cannot be easily captured by a DNA ancestry test. Another critical issue is the reliance on reference databases to interpret your DNA. These databases compare your genetic markers to those of individuals from various populations from around the world. However, they're often incomplete or biased, particularly toward populations of European descent. If your ancestry includes regions or populations underrepresented in these databases, your results might be inaccurate or misleading. For example, a test might indicate a broad connection to West Africa, but without sufficient data from particular ethnic groups within that region, the results lack precision. Dr. Kimberly Tallbear, an anthropologist and professor at the University of Alberta, has critiqued the use of DNA testing in determining American Indian identity. She argues that these tests oversimplify complex issues of identity and belonging. According to Tallbear, DNA tests can't capture the cultural, historical, and social dimensions of what it means to belong to a particular community. Relying on genetic tests to determine identity can erase the complex and varied histories of indigenous peoples, reducing them to mere genetic markers. False positives and false negatives also pose significant challenges in genetic ancestry testing. A false positive might suggest you have ancestry from a particular region or ethnic group when you do not, while a false negative might miss an actual connection. For instance, someone might be told they have American Indian ancestry based on a few genetic markers, but these markers are not unique to American Indian populations. They could also be found in other indigenous populations or even non indigenous groups. This can lead to inaccurate claims of ancestry, which might have significant personal or even legal implications. The case of the Seminole freedmen is a powerful example of the limitations of using DNA to determine identity. Descendants of freed slaves who have historically been a part of the Seminole Nation, known as Seminole freedmen, have faced unique challenges when it comes to proving their heritage. It's important to note that many individuals with full-blooded American Indian ancestry were also classified as freedmen due to their proximity to Blackness or the presence of features identified as Black, leading to them being categorized as either freedmen or Black Indians. When DNA testing became more accessible, some of these descendants sought to use it as evidence to reclaim their tribal membership. However, the Seminole Nation rejected DNA testing as a valid form of proof for tribal affiliation, asserting that cultural identity and community membership are determined by far more than just genetics. This case underscores a broader reality. DNA ancestry tests, or DNA tests in general, cannot capture the full complexity of identity, which encompasses cultural, historical, and social dimensions that extend beyond genetic markers. Admixture testing, often marketed as providing a percentage breakdown of your ancestry from different regions, is another aspect of genetic genealogy testing that comes with its own set of challenges. These tests look at non sex chromosomes inherited from both parents and attempt to estimate your genetic makeup. However, these estimates are based on ancestry informative markers, or AIMs, that can be problematic. These markers are chosen based on their frequency in certain populations. But if the reference samples are not representative of the full diversity within these populations, the results can be misleading. For example, in a mixture test might tell you that you are 20% Scandinavian, but this can be due to overlapping genetic markers that are not exclusive to that region. Dr. Troy Duster, a sociologist and author of Backdoor to Eugenics, warns that genetic tests often reinforce a misguided belief in biological determinism. He cautions that these tests can inadvertently support the notion that our identities and abilities are strictly determined by our genetic makeup, rather than shaped by our environments, cultures, and histories. While genetics can provide some insights, they cannot account for the full complexity of human experience. Beyond the technical limitations, there are real dangers associated with genetic genealogy testing. One significant concern is privacy. When you submit your DNA for testing, you're not just learning about your ancestry, you're also potentially exposing your genetic information to third parties. This information could be used for purposes you might not agree with, such as law enforcement databases, research studies, or even commercial interests. Additionally, genetic data breaches are a real risk, and once your genetic information is out there, you cannot take it back. There's also psychological impact to consider. Discovering unexpected or unwelcome information about your ancestry, such as unknown relatives or surprising ethnic connections, can be emotionally challenging. It can disrupt your family dynamics and cause significant personal distress. For some, the information might conflict with long held beliefs or family narratives, leading to identity crisis or familial tensions. So now I know you're probably like, okay, well, you said all this. So what do I do? If I can't rely on DNA ancestry tests, what can I rely on? Where does this leave us? So while genetic ancestry tests offer exciting possibilities for many, they should be approached with caution and with a critical eye. They are not definitive answers to questions about your ancestry or identity. Instead, consider using these tests as just one tool in your genealogical research toolkit. Combining genetic tests with traditional research methods, such as researching historical documentation, engaging with family oral histories, and consulting with genealogy experts, can give you a more accurate and nuanced understanding of your ancestry. For example, if a DNA ancestry test suggests a connection to a certain region, cross-reference this with historical records or family stories to see if it aligns with what you know. Dive into census records, birth and death certificates, land deeds, and other historical documents that can provide concrete evidence of your family's history. Engage with older family members to capture oral histories that might not be recorded elsewhere. These traditional methods offer a deep and cultural exchange that genetic tests alone cannot provide. These traditional methods offer a deep look into your ancestry that genetic ancestry tests alone cannot provide. In conclusion, while genetic ancestry tests offer intriguing insights, they come with significant limitations and risks that must be understood. They do not and cannot provide definitive proof of your race, ethnicity, or full ancestry. By integrating these tests with more traditional forms of research, you can build a richer, more accurate picture of your family history. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up, share it with others who might benefit from this information, and drop a comment with your thoughts or experiences. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell button to stay updated on all my latest content. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next video.